And now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jeremy.
It is such a blessing to be a member of this church and to be learning about Christian Science. I used to have so much fear, but all I am learning here is burning that fear away. 2 weeks ago, a new version of the code that part of the church's website is built upon came out. As soon as I saw that, I started to pray, and I knew that God would show me the right time to do this update. The days went by, and I didn't feel it was time, but then last Wednesday, I got a very good feeling about it. But then I started to fight it, thinking, it's Wednesday, it wouldn't error love to bring the site down. So I resisted for a few hours. But then I realized that while it is important to be wise about the work done at the church, I cannot be superstitious about it either. So I prayed again and still felt it was the right time, and I did a thorough backup and then updated the code. Through the whole process, I knew all would be well, and it was. The website remained fully functional. I'm grateful for all of this because it is yet another example of God's constant care and of the ever-presence of truth and love. Christian Science is by far the greatest blessing I've ever received, and I'm so grateful for all this church and its members do and have done to make sure the world has access to it. I am also grateful for daily practitioner support, which always provides me with the opportunity to know I am ready to take on whatever God has next for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for this beautiful service and readings. Long ago, I had a physical healing because of Christian Science. I was new to this science and did not belong to a church, and therefore never gave a testimony. Tonight, I would like to express my gratitude for this healing of sinus trouble. I was told by a doctor that I would have to undergo an operation in order to correct the problem. My in-laws were Christian Scientists, and I called their practitioner. Mr. Campbell recited the scientific statement of being, told me to find it on page 468 in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and to study this statement. It ends with these words, quote, Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. Mr. Campbell also told me to say, and I am that man, when I got to the end of the statement. I never had to have that operation, and the pain left, and it was, I'm sorry, I have to turn the page. It was the end of it. Thank you to our practitioners, Mrs. Eddy, Plainfield Church, and our loving God. Thank you.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Ever since I began to learn more about myself in relationship with God through Christian Science and the support of my practitioner, I have felt a greater desire for peace and harmony within my home. Having come into my relationship with all the baggage of past experiences, I found it very difficult to relate to the wants and needs of others. I had the wrong concept of obligation and thought if I poured every bit of myself into making the other person's life better, I could be content with who I was. But in the end, it only caused me to feel resentful and angry. I could no longer meet the obligations and expectations I had devoted everything to. Giving all to one person left little time and resources to give positive thought towards the world or devotion to God. I lost my creativity, my inspiration, my charitableness, and hope. We had become strangers living under the same roof and argued often. My practitioner has worked to teach me the necessity of developing the proper sense of who I am in God, which has given me the moral courage to change the character I had relied on and come to accept as my inheritance. I learned to claim God as my father-mother, leaving behind past dispositions and expressing the inherent qualities which are natural to God's ideas. I learned to rebuke the error and stand porter at the door of thought, accepting only truth and applying it in my daily living. This has changed my relationship in ways I never could imagine. Slowly, over the past year, I have noticed a stronger sense of unity developing. We are both working together to care for each other's needs, paying the bills, sharing the workload. Most of all, pride, jealousy, covetousness have given place to loving kindness, and there is a genuine sense of nurturing the heart and soul of what makes a relationship harmonious. We have both been free to work out our own salvation and pursue the things of God. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy for this science, to my practitioner for the many healings that have occurred in my life, and for the continuing support she gives me in the battle to rise above the discord and find happiness in soul. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the inspired readings and the music and the wonderful testimonies so far. I want to express my gratitude tonight for our audio recordings that are available 24/7 on our Plainfield website. One evening, I felt a barrage of heaviness that I had great difficulty rising out of. I decided to turn to the audios and specifically picked the teaching testimonies by our Plainfield practitioners. The one that helped me this time was called Keep Your Joy. Mrs. Singletary tells of a time she felt heaviness and how she prayed. She references 500 watches. One of the analogies was made as if you fell through the ice, you would not at once swim to shore, but rise up. What I also got from this was that I should not attempt to do anything, especially in Christian Science, except from joy. And one thing that I could do was have gratitude for God's blessings. I started a gratitude list. I was going to begin work on our Bible study questions for that week, and I felt a deep gratitude for these studies and discussions of our Bible and all the work that goes into it and a prayerful support. This opened my heart to joy for this work, and this was the turning point for me. The heaviness faded. We are so blessed for the many opportunities to serve and be active in this church that also is a blessing back for us. I'm very grateful for all our practitioners, for Mrs. Eddy, and for her writings, and for God. Thank you so much for this service tonight.
Thank you. Gary.
One of the things that I am very grateful to be learning in this church is to appreciate rebukes. Before I came to Plainfield, I found it very difficult to rebuke anyone or anything. The thought of telling somebody that they'd done something wrong and to risk hurting their feelings, just really very difficult for me. But when I got to the Plainfield Church, I met a practitioner who was very good at telling me when I was doing or saying things that were not right with God. And I learned that that is what makes all the difference. And even though I didn't initially appreciate him at the time, I learned to appreciate him. And as I look back now, I treasure those rebukes just about more than anything else, because they showed me when I was being selfish, willful, stubborn, ungrateful, and they helped me to make some very needed changes in my life and to put the things of God in much higher importance in my life. So as a result of these rebukes and other help, I am a much happier and healthier person. I know I'm more humble than I would have otherwise been, and happy as a result of that. I've learned that giving a rebuke requires a tremendous amount of love. And if I love others, I have to be willing to do the same thing as well, out of love, of course. Mrs. Eddy writes in our textbook, Jesus rebuked sinners pointedly and unflinchingly because he was their friend. So I'm very grateful to the practitioners I've been privileged to work with in this church for being such good friends. And I'm so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for giving us this tremendous science and for being a member of this church.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. A grateful heart a garden is, and how grateful I am. And I wish to express my gratitude for practitioners in our church. It seems that every time that you hear from them, they are telling you exactly what you need to hear. And it is most gratifying because it lifts you up and boosts you that extra little step that helps make things easier for you. I am so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Come stand in front of the mic. Craig.
So glad to be a member of this church. And the readings on pure motives remind me of how God has helped me, and I'm sure many others. So much good has happened if learning Christian Science and learning really how to live correctly, and then in order to do that, to think correctly, to accept the love of God and His direction. Mary Baker Eddy is tremendous in all her writings, and our teacher and our practitioners have been such a help. So many good things have happened, but my wife and I realized that we had a lot to give, and so we prayed to have a little child, and with the support of our teacher, we adopted a little one, and we were told, just 4 days old, and we were told that every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above. It's from the Bible. It comes down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variable is a shadow of turning. And we worked that during the time we were walking the road to matching up for a young one. And it has given us such a light at every little turn, even now that he's 14. As an infant, he got a hernia, and he was so small, but this church is such a safe place. My wife is not a Christian Scientist, and she wanted the doctor to handle it, but the doctor wouldn't. Said, he's too small. We're not going to touch this little fella. And so our practitioner and teacher supported and healed that little fella. And his hernia closed and beautifully. And at every little bump in the road, a teacher or practitioner was involved and made things right. Because innocently, things would happen that weren't God's plan. But God would take care of it and fix it. And He still is. But I realize that I thank God because the pure motive, I'm sure, is what, and it's sincere, allowed us to always be able to get back to God and get things right. I thank God for that, what we learn here and His guidance throughout our lives.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful readings and testimonies tonight. It's all so inspiring. And the hymn that we just sang, God giveth light to all who ask with prayer sincere. He doth not fail to hear that call. His truth is ever near. I had an experience that really showed me this. Yesterday, I had to download on my computer an update that took like over 5 hours. And when it was over, I went to do some work on my computer, and what I had used in the past wasn't working. It just had disappeared from my computer. And I went through all my settings, I checked everything on my computer, and nothing had changed. I hadn't done anything. And it was some important work that I do for church, and I knew that this couldn't be lost. And so I just tried to be quiet and ask God how to go. And it kept coming to me, call the company where you got the computer. So I did that. And I called the support, and I explained to them the situation and what had happened, and I didn't know why it had happened. And they didn't know either, and they had me check a number of things, and then someone turned me over to someone else. And they knew I explained to them what I needed to do, and they knew how important it was to me. And so they said, well, they would figure this out, somehow they would do it. And to make a long story short, they were so kind and patient, and they found another program for me that was even better than the one that I had. So I'm able to do the work that I have always done for a good long time, and it just worked out so wonderfully and harmoniously, and nothing was lost. And then I asked the person that I was talking to who was helping me, well, can I give you my credit card? And they said, oh, no, we support the people who, buy our products. And so I didn't even have to spend any money to fix it, and it was all taken care of. And I'm just so grateful to God. I'm so grateful to that we have this truth to turn to know that He's ever present and He leads us in the right direction. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Day or Florence, go ahead.
This is Day. Thank you. Recently, while watching a popular television trivia show, there were several questions that I answered correctly, which were related to certain Bible stories and passages. I realized that this has been occurring more often lately, and this is something I must express gratitude for. Becoming more familiar with and closer to the Bible is a tremendous healing that I was not intentionally searching for, but desperately needed. If it weren't for all that we have here that keeps me in constant study and practice of truth, I would still be going along in life with no connection to the greatest book we have. I'm so grateful to God for fulfilling my need to gain a deeper understanding of His Word in order to be a better worker, and for the inspiration and joy that comes from continuing to do so. Thank you so much for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Suzanne from Vermont, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm so grateful to be at the service tonight, and I don't want to be anywhere else, even though there were things that places I could be. This church has taught me to put God as a priority in my life. My motives growing up in Christian Science or before coming to this church were not right. And I have to thank this church and the teachings in the church and the practitioners for setting me straight. I remember the first time that I heard that God should be at the center of your daily life. You're the center of your life. And the first time I heard that, it was like being hit over the head. And now looking back, it seems absurd that I didn't know that all along. But thank God I was set straight, and now my life is so much more full and meaningful, having God at the center of my life and everything I do, instead of having him up on a shelf to take down every now and then when I was absolutely desperate. I thank God for having found this church, for the beautiful website, music, and teachings, and it's only since coming to this church that I'm able to be a true Christian and reach out to others and share Christian Science with others. I'm so grateful to be here for these wonderful readings tonight and for all the blessings this church gives, and can't thank you all enough.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland. Go ahead.
I'm very grateful for the very meaningful and beautiful readings tonight. I am forever grateful that Plainfield quite literally saved my life. I had suffered clinical depression for the past 5 years before I came here. Searching on the internet, hoping to find some help, I came across a quote from Bicknell Young's article, Consciousness, Where Art Thou?, which truly spoke to me. Then there was a phone number, and when I called it, my practitioner answered. From then on, the veil was lifted from my life, and the rest is a joyful journey. In addition to my practitioner's ever-available help, I am grateful for everything offered by Plainfield. All the teaching, the lessons, Bible studies and round tables, all the literature made available that I had never heard of before. Tonight, I want to give particular gratitude for the recent mention in one of our sessions of a book by Henry Drummond, The Greatest Thing in the World, which is, of course, love. It is a short book discussing Paul's 1 Corinthians chapter 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, that is, love. Paul goes on to describe the perfect character. Love suffereth long and is kind, and goes on. Drummond enlarges on each of these Christian qualities in his very small book, and is wonderful and helpful to me in my ongoing work and practice of the Christian life and Christian Science. I'm very grateful to Plainfield, to all those who have gone before and understood the truth, and to God.
Thank you. Lil.
I have been so blessed in so many ways since coming to this church, and have found such a security when I found God. I used to always ask others' advice in making decisions, but here I learned to turn only to God for all my answers, and He's always with me to help me. What a foundation. He's a solid rock and has only the best for me. What a freedom. He's my best friend. And I'm just so grateful. And thank you for those readings.
Thank you. This is Bruce. There's an article on our website that just recently showed up, and I found it very helpful. It was about the prayer in Christian Science. And it says many things, but one of which is, when you pray to God, don't tell him what the outcome should be. He's going to do his will regardless of what we think our personal preference may be. And I found that so helpful, because it kind of reminded me of at a time when I prayed with all my heart to God that his will be done, and the next day it rained, and then I complained because we didn't have bright, warm, sunny weather, without giving any consideration that maybe the rain was the answer to the prayer. You know, there's a higher intelligence that knows what the right answer is. Well, I was just thinking about that recently, because around our area here we've had an extended period where the weather's been cold and wet, for unusually so for this time of year. But as a result, all of the flowering trees have given us a very extended display of beauty, and beautiful they are. So instead of complaining about the cold and wet, I'm thanking God that he gave us so much beauty day after day after day. He loves us that much to give us that. So thank you, Father. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
I'm so grateful to God for Christian Science, and especially for some expanded meanings of some important words. Something I read from an essay by Mrs. Eddy taught me a lot about discouragement. Discouragement and self-pity used to be some of my frequent challenges. Mrs. Eddy says that discouragement is impatience. It is haste to tread where we have not conquered, to occupy a place we have not proven our fitness to fill. She also said that impatience is doubt, doubting God's willingness to help us. And this understanding has been a great help to me. It's helped me to question always why I would doubt God, when the truth that is so emphasized through Christian Science is that God is ever near. As our hymn number 7 says towards the end, it says that I need not plead, thou dost abide with me. It helps to know that in those times of discouragement, all we need to do is to turn to God, to know that he's here. And I guess often we can ask ourselves why we don't. Because again, as the reading said, it says that what does hinder me? I could ask that. What would hinder me from obeying the truth? The very thing that is so near and will give the peace that I'm searching for. Thank you so much for the readings tonight, for everyone's testimony and the hymns. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Mary.
I'll read from our church website bulletin board. Got a lot from Georgia and Pennsylvania tonight. The first, Pennsylvania. Special thanks to testifiers at last week's testimony meeting and the one before. I've listened to these wonderful testimonies repeatedly. Blessings to all. And then Georgia, thank you for the inspiring Wednesday evening service on April 27th. What I love about Plainfield is that all the services, publications, and activities are for the glorification and love of God and mankind. What more could we ask for? In Pennsylvania, In Gilbert Carpenter's book, Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, on pages 298 to 299, it is mentioned that we should have no sympathy with Era, and that animal magnetism was the term used to cover anything operating in a subtle way to shut out God. Mrs. Eddy was always alert to animal magnetism and taught her students to also be alert to anything that would shut out God. And another from Pennsylvania. In the roundtable today, we discussed church participation and the blessings it brings. I just wanted to take the time to thank both Wendy and Heidi for the readings they picked and shared today. Wendy's scriptural selection was just the healing message I needed, and Heidi's fruitage choice inspired me. Often we don't always know who we touch, so I wanted to take some time to express my appreciation for the work they did for our service. I also really enjoyed hearing the flute and one of my favorite psalms during the duo today. And then Georgia. Today's calendar quote says, "God does not withhold any good from his children. When man does his part, he receives the blessing." Thank God for Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, a place and a platform for us all to learn how best to do our part according to his will, to receive endless blessings while blessing others. And this is a email from one of our newer friends from California. I would like to share some further thoughts I had about the last Bible study on the tares in the wheat, which I found profoundly helpful. Thanks to all who participated. The wheat and tares discussion really grew strong in me that morning. I have a special fondness for wheat fields, as I used to live in Walla Walla, Washington, where there are plenty of wheat fields, and wow, they are so beautiful to me. As I began to reflect on what wheat and/or wheat fields represented to me, I came up with the following ideas, which flowed into my spirit seemingly all at once. Wheat represents upright, as it grows straight towards the heavens. One mind, unity. Looking out over the field, it is consistent and moves in unison with the others despite the elements, which is like church gatherings and support of its members. Free-flowing is flexible, blowing in the breeze, free to move, but still looking up. The stalk is always upright, looking to the heavens for its sustenance. The stalk of wheat does not bend frantically when it sees a tare, or does it go into a tizzy, crying, screaming for all to look at its tare, or worry about the tare, nor does the stalk spin its head looking around to see if it fits in, or worries about what other stalks are thinking of him. No, the stalk quietly knows it is cared for, loved, and remains calmly reaching for the heavens, perfect as God made it to be, as we are. Tares represents the snags, the problems, confusion, remarks, looks, clogged circumstances, worry, despair, discouragement, depression, blah, blah, blah. In other words, anything that would take my attention from looking up and seeing God. When speaking to the practitioner about this analogy, I thought these tares represented something outside of myself, but they are tares in me that try to assert their importance, that need correcting, to see myself as the reflection of the perfect God, just as the carefree, beautiful, free-flowing wheat fields. Thank you for those readings tonight. I thought, Mrs. Eddy's chapter on prayer is a masterpiece. I know I heard someone recently in need of a healing, and the prayer that was given was one of pleading to God to please help me, please save me. And I know at one time in my life that was certainly my sense of prayer as well. But when you really read and study Mrs. Eddy's chapter on prayer, you see the right prayer, the prayer that Jesus prayed. She says they were conscientious protestations of truth. It's the prayer of affirmation. It is knowing God's presence and power ever with us. It is knowing, as this week's lesson is about, the first creation, that God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. This is the prayer. It's the prayer of thanksgiving, the gratitude for all the good that he has done and all the good that he is giving us right here and right now. This kind of prayer is what raises your thought. It raises your thought to see what God has already done. And as was read tonight, that we don't have to reach out in vain to him. He's always with us, and he answers every prayer when it is this kind of recognition of all that he is, all that he always will be. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy and for our textbook. She so lovingly and explicitly explains the truth of our being, including how to pray right so that we can feel our Father's presence and power with us. And that is what results in healing. So grateful to be here tonight and to have heard all the wonderful testimonies and the beautiful readings and the beautiful music. Thank you.
Thank you.